Hey Bob, what's it going to cost me to sell my property?
Well, that's a good question, Jason. I think that's a question that a lot of sellers should ask way before they think about putting their house on the market. Generally, the costs that are involved in selling your property, at least in the New York City metropolitan area, one is transfer tax. Transfer tax is a tax to the city of New York as well as the state of New York. It ranges anywhere from about 1.4% of the gross sale price to 2% to almost 2% of the gross sale price. So if you're selling a $1 million property, you're probably giving New York City and New York State a total of about $20,000. So that's a substantial cost. The next large cost that you'll incur is the broker's commission. Broker's commissions in this area generally run 4 to 6%. So that could be a substantial number, also affecting your bottom line. Then, although this isn't a cost, it is something that will affect your net. That's the balance of your mortgage. Don't forget, when you go to the closing, you do have to pay off your mortgage company. It's required by the note and the mortgage that you signed when you first bought the property. So if you have an $800,000 property, you're selling $1 million home. A lot of people may say, wow, that Jason's getting a lot of money. But really, by the time you pay off your mortgage, you're only netting about 200,000 minus brokers' commissions, transfer taxes, etc. You also may have some cost for fix up of the property, repairs. Although you think you're selling a perfectly fine house, buyers may say that certain things are wrong. There are certain plumbing issues, electric issues, crack issues, window issues, appliance issues that may cause you to spend a few dollars, to make repairs and upgrades and improvements. You also have a potential termite bill. Termites could do one of two things. They could just be in there around doing some damage to your property. Treatment costs are about $1,000, and provided that the termites have not done substantial damage, you probably only need to expend $1,000 for treatment. If they've done substantial damage, you may end up having to pay for repair of beams and things like that, and that's a very costly repair. You have attorney's fees. Attorney's fees usually range in the low $1,000 range to the mid thousands of dollar range, depending on the complexity of the transaction. And you have some minor document preparation fees, disbursements that the attorney lays out for you. But overall, those are, and then let us not forget the one that doesn't show up at the closing. These are all expenses that you incur prior to or at the closing. The expense that you don't incur is the capital gains tax, which occurs the next April 15th after you sell your property. And I advise all my clients to consult with their CPA to determine whether or not they have a capital gain issue. Rough rule of thumb for capital gain is that individuals have a $250,000 exclusion from gain on their property. If they're married, they have a $500,000 gain. So that's a pretty big number of excluding, tax from your capital gain. But it's something you should consider, especially for people who may have owned their property for 40, 50 years, bought it when it was $20,000, selling it now when it's $1 million, and even though they've lived in it and think is exempt from capital gains as their primary residence, it's probably not. They probably do have some tax, and it's probably better to find out before you go into the sale of your house than the next April 15th when your accountant tells you, hey, you have a $300,000 tax liability. So those are most of the expenses that you'll incur, and you probably should know them much earlier before you list your house than finding out as you're walking out the door of a closing room.